little tall. Good evening and welcome. My name is Sarah Sanchez, and I'm honored to serve as the Director of Programs and Communications for the National Association for Urban Debate Leagues, known as NAUDL. NAUDL serves as a backbone organization for 20 urban debate leagues across the country, which we know of as the Urban Debate Network. Working together, this network addresses a tremendous gap in the education landscape, helping students like you bring skills that elevate academic achievement, verbal communication, and civic engagement. Now, more than ever, we believe in the power of amplifying voices and fostering open dialogue as catalysts for a better future. For the 5th season and our second in Dallas, we are excited to present iResolve, a public debate series launched in 2020 with a goal of engaging high school debaters in real conversations about the most pressing issues in their communities. Tonight, we bring you this program in partnership with the Dallas Urban Debate Alliance. This debate showcase provides a platform for students to demonstrate their talents of persuasion, research, and critical thinking honed through participation in competitive debate. Unlike what passes for political debate on TV, I believe we are competing with a senatorial debate tonight. We hope our students affirm your faith in the great American tradition of debate, which is rooted in thoughtful analysis, evidence, respectful discourse on critical issues facing our communities. For the past few weeks, students have been preparing well-developed arguments that propose viable solutions to reform elections in the United States. In tonight's debate, students will compare and contrast strategies for electoral reform, including campaign finance reform and open primaries. After the debaters' initial arguments, our esteemed guest panelists will offer commentary on the debaters' arguments, providing both perspective and feedback for students to consider before the final summation of their cases. We are very grateful to our expert panelists, including our newest NAUDL board member, Aaron Timmons, who brings decades of experience and expertise to tonight's debate showcase. He served as the coach of Team USA and is currently the director of debate at the Green Hill School. We're also pleased to have the DUDA board chair, Alex Moore, on the panel. He is a law partner at Carrington Coleman, where he runs the litigation department. And finally, join me in welcoming DUDA board member Ashley Glover, a seasoned CEO and investor focusing on technology companies. Most recently, she was the CEO of WebPT, which provides software to therapy practices. She's been a board member of DUDA since 2014, a mother of 3 teens who unfortunately decided not to debate. She has a BS from SMU and an MBA from Harvard Business School. This dynamic discussion is possible with the help of our generous 2024 iResolve financial sponsors. And I want to acknowledge with personal appreciation our series sponsor, the Asia Group Foundation. Thank you for your continued commitment to NAUDL, and in particular this public platform. I am sure there are members of the Asia Group Foundation on our live stream remote. And of course, I extend our gratitude to the Dallas Independent School District and the Yvonne A. Ewell Townview Magnet Center for allowing us to host tonight's event in this exceptional facility. And with that, I am pleased to introduce Cindy Timmons, the executive director of our league here in Dallas and a dear friend, to say a few words and introduce tonight's debaters. Again, thank you for joining us this evening for a night to honor debate.
Thank you, Sarah. The Dallas Urban Debate Alliance treasures its partnership with NAUDL and all they do for debaters across the country. I've now been involved in debate for far too many decades to say on live stream, but debate's a big, important part of my life, and my tenure here at the Dallas Urban Debate Alliance has been the highlight of that experience. Debate is a big part in American history. If you know anything and studied the colonial time period, you know that public debate was integral to the American DNA. If you trace our history in political elections over the late 1800s and early 1900s, you know that public debate was a big part of that process. Unfortunately, I think we've all witnessed the failure of American debate to really deal with the polarization that exists in this country. We are hoping that events like this allow students to show adults across the country and the world what civil and civic discourse looks like as they dig deep into the hard issues facing our country. Tonight, these 4 students will be talking about how to make the American election system better. We have the longest election system in the world, We also have the most expensive election system in the world. And each team has researched what they find troubling about the American election system and is proposing a specific way to try to reform that process so that it's better for all Americans. I'm now going to have each of our 4 students introduce themselves. They'll say their name, their grade, and the school that they attend.
Hi, my name is Leah. I am in 12th grade and I go to Irma Ringo.
Hi, my name is Neethi. I'm in 10th grade and I go to Townview Tag.
Hi, my name is William. I'm in 10th grade and I go to JBS Law Magnet.
Hi, my name is Alasia. I'm a junior at Sunset High School.
Tonight's format will involve 4 6-minute constructive speeches and then 4 3-minute replies. We will alternate with side proposition, opposition, and then an open cross-X period. Proposition, opposition, an open cross-X period, and then the judge panel will ask a question to each team. We will then conclude the debate with 4 3-minute replies. I will now invite the first speaker from sides proposition to the stage.
Before we begin, we'd like to offer a few thank yous. We'd like to thank the National Association of Urban Debate Leagues for their leadership across the network and the Asia Group Foundation for their sponsorship of the iResolve debate program. We'd also like to thank the Dallas Urban Debate Alliance and Dallas Independent School District for their partnership in making debate possible across our district. We also want to thank our coaches and administrators for supporting debate at Irma Rangel Young Women's Leadership School, JBS Law Magnet, the School for the Talented and Gifted at Townview, and Sunset High School. We hope you enjoy our debate. Every American deserves the right to vote and to have their vote counted. Former President George W. Bush. Because we believe that everyone's vote should be represented, we are so proud to propose that the United States federal government should reform the U.S. national electoral system. We specifically endorse addressing the lack of transparency in U.S. elections and implementing a public campaign finance system. Over $2.6 billion has been spent from outside groups such as political action committees so far on the 2024 U.S. election. Super PACs supporting Trump have spent over $239 million so far, while Super PACs supporting Harris have spent over $212 million. In 2020, the U.S. election spending was $27.41 per capita. On the other hand, Australia, which has a public funding program, spent only $11.84 per capita on the 2019 election, which helps show just how outrageous the cost of federal elections in the United States truly is. A big reason for the high cost of U.S. national elections is the lack of transparency and accountability when it comes to campaign finance. You can expect me to do 2 things in this speech. First, I will go over some key framing issues, and then I will present the first 2 substantives on side prop. First, we recognize that in the status quo, elections are too polarizing, and lesser-known candidates don't have a chance of making it to primaries, because wealthier candidates are able to use their massive amounts of funding to have an unfair advantage over the other candidates. When there are only 2 polarized candidates, moderate voters often are unable to choose one that fits with their political views. The proposition side supports reforms that allow more diverse candidate options while promoting greater transparency from their financial supporters. Secondly, we offer a few definitions. An electoral system is a set of rules used in politics that determine the results of an election and govern all aspects of the voting process, such as how ballots are cast, limits on campaign spending, and other factors that can affect the result of an election. Campaign finance reform is an effort to change the rules on how political campaigns can be paid for, with the aim of making them fairer. Dark money is political spending meant to influence the decision of a voter, where the donor is not disclosed and the source of money is unknown. Third, we offer a comparative. On our side, reforming the campaign finance system will allow the public to consider the impact of major donors on candidates and allow more obscure candidates to be considered, which will make elections more fair and less polarized. However, on side op, you will continue to see a less representative election system because without campaign finance reform, there is less transparency and accountability and less representative candidates. Fourth, we assert that the prop has the burden of proving that our plan would increase representation, accountability, and allow lesser-known candidates to run for national office. Op's burden is to prove that their plan will create a more representative electoral system. Our first argument is the need to overturn the impact of Citizens United. The Citizens United v. FEC Supreme Court decision, issued in 2010, caused significant damage to the American electoral system by allowing corporations to spend unlimited money on elections. One of the largest impacts of the SCOTUS ruling was the creation of PACs, or political action committees. These committees are created for the sole purpose of raising or spending money to elect or defeat a specific candidate, and often reward the wealthiest donors with political influence. This has made it much harder for other candidates to compete against those who receive significant funding. Overturning this ruling or enacting legislation to counter its impact would help make it so elections don't favor the wealthy candidates as much. Super PACs have had huge impacts on elections because they allow outside organizations to accept unlimited amounts of money from other sources and then spend that money on independently produced ads that attack or promote specific candidates without being officially affiliated with a certain candidate. From 2010 to 2018, Super PACs spent about $2.9 billion on federal elections. Citizens United also opened the door to an increase in the spending of dark money, which has dramatically derailed transparency in federal elections. Dark money also allows foreign countries to hide their monetary contributions from the US federal government, which increases the vulnerability of US elections. Ending the impact of Citizens United would make elections more accessible to other candidates. This in turn would open up more options for voters. Alternative candidates with different viewpoints would be able to make it to elections, giving voters more options. According to a 2020 study by ABC News, 31% of non-voters said they didn't vote because they didn't like either of the major party candidates. Providing voters with more options will not only make elections more representative, but will also increase voter turnout. Our second argument is the importance of transparency and accountability in the US election system. Passing the Disclose Act upholds democracy and accountability. The foundation of the US government is rooted in the principle of democracy, which is the power that resides with the people through voting. However, in order for people to cast informed votes, the system needs transparency and accountability. Transparency is more democratic than secrecy, because people can't hold these candidates accountable if they aren't honest. With the passing of the Disclose Act of 2023, we access a few things. First, we limit campaign spending by foreign nationals. This will reduce their influence on foreign policy considerations, campaigns, and policies, giving American voters more influence and making elections less costly overall. Second, we have more transparency between donors, candidates, and the public. This law specifically targets campaign financing, placing explicit burdens on candidates to report their spending on campaigns, allowing the public to see where their money is going. You can only hold one accountable with transparency, and you can't have transparency in federal elections without the Disclose Act. There are a few impacts to this argument. First, we reduce the influence of dark money, which is money going towards elections that cannot be traced by the public, because now candidates are required to report their campaign donations and spending to the public. Second, we hold candidates more accountable. By exposing their supporters and their related agendas, candidates are more closely observed by the public. In conclusion, democracy is undermined in the current election system. Candidates must be held accountable, and elections must be made more fair for all candidates, instead of favoring wealthy candidates who can hide their expenditures from the public and can have nearly unlimited funds. Therefore, we ask the panel to side with the proposition in today's debate. Thank you.
We agree with side proposition that the current system is harmful. However, we do not agree with the proposition's method of solving. We, the opposition, believe reforming open primaries is the better solution for this problem. We support a different area of reform. The United States federal government should reform the national election system by changing the primary voting system to reduce the dominance of the two-party system. And now I will give a roadmap. In my case, I'll be presenting our arguments and then going on to attack a few arguments that was made by side proposition. There is a large amount of extreme polarization caused by the electoral system. However, we do not agree with the campaign finance reform is the solution. We believe the real issue is the current status quo is the lack of not only choice, but also representation within our nation. In order for us to solve this, we propose open primaries. Now I would like to give a few definitions I will be using in this speech. Open primary is a primary election which voters are not required to declare party affiliation. Party system in the United States is a preliminary election to appoint the delegates to a party conference or to select candidates for the principal. Third party is a different party for independent voters. Is it a party that aligns with political views for independent voters, whatever they may be? My first claim is the advantages of an open primary system. An open party system is a system that allows for Americans to vote without forcing themselves to declare themselves a member of a certain political party. Many Americans don't vote, Just because not because they don't want to, but simply because they can't choose, because some of these parties don't align with their own beliefs. And if a party doesn't align with your beliefs, you're obviously not going to vote for it. If we want to engage in the current American electoral system, we are forced to pick between two polarizing parties, Democrat or Republican. Even if you consider yourself a member of one of these parties, you're not allowed to vote for other candidates who are registered in other parties. When you vote, you shouldn't vote solely on a party. You should vote on a candidate and the policies that they're introducing for us to make our society better. It forces you to vote for a party. This is unjust, and it restricts our votes from expressing our actual views. An open primary can foster an engaged and informed society. This decreases polarization in politics and unites us for a greater good. This is because of the following. Number one, greater representation of diverse views. Open primaries allow independents and members of minority parties to participate in the election, ensuring that a wide array of perspectives is considered. This broad participation helps candidates address issues that matter to a large segment of the population, rather than just catering to an extreme of their party leading to policies that reflect a broader social concerns. My second argument is driving for policy change increases competition. Diverse candidates can encourage established parties to adopt progressive policies to stay relevant. When there are multiple parties, there are also more ideas. These ideas better represent the diverse citizens of our country. Some may be policies that express individual expression and identity. This phenomenon has been observed to various European nations where smaller parties have pushed larger parties and to address issues like climate change and social justice. By implementing reforms like open primary system, the United States increases voter participation, but also enhances accountability and innovation, leading to a healthier democracy. Now, my first layer of this will be encouraging progressive policy adoption. Did you know that the studies show voters exposed to diverse candidates are 40% more likely to engage in political discussion? This is one example of how representation in policies such as better education programs, for one, can create more well-informed electorates. To have a more progressive policy adoption is similar to having the progressive pace of multi-party system. This calls for more effective, faster, and woke policies to match the current status quo and not the ideals of democracy we advocated for hundreds of years ago. Countries with a multi-party system, such as Finland or New Zealand, have shown the difference in how having diverse representation can affect how much the government collaborates and creates policy making. In these nations, new voices have actually created change in more mainstream parties that had adopted emerging issues. This same potential can absolutely be possible in the United States. Now, an example of this can be the Green League. The emergence of the Green League in the 1980s brought environmental issues to front for Finnish politics. As the party gained representation, mainstream parties had to address climate change and sustainability more seriously. Now I would like to go on by attacking the proposition's case. The proposition argues that overturning Citizens United and passing Disclose Act will increase voter representation. These reforms alone will not address the fundamental issues plaguing our electoral system. Simply limiting funding does not guarantee better candidates or increase voter turnout. Imposing stricter financial reforms can lead to unintended consequences, such as candidates relying even more on wealthy donors for approved funding, which may further entrench the status quo. The proposition claims that campaign finance reforms will open a field for candidates and increase options for voters. This assumption oversimplifies the dynamics of elections. Candidate quality and voter preferences are influenced by factors beyond just funding, including experience and policy positions. Candidates from other parties Candidates may still struggle to resonate with voters regardless of funding. By focusing solely on financial reform, the proposition overlooks the complexities of voter decision-making. The proposition argues that passing the Disclose Act will enhance transparency and accountability. If you were to even take into consideration the Disclose Act, it will cause more harm than good. The Disclose Act takes away from freedom of speech that these candidates have. The ACLU, which is an organization that helps to voice for the people, has voted opposition to the Disclose Act, arguing that the legislation could infringe on First Amendment rights, particularly by limiting free speech and the ability of individuals and groups to participate in political discourse anonymously. This could deter political engagement, stopping engagement. This is why we urge the panel to side-by-side opposition.
How is your side going to increase candidate or policy representation without campaign financing?
So there's a variety of ways that candidates are able to advocate for themselves and bring awareness to their policy actions. So this could be social media and just a bunch of different things to help them actually gain awareness.
Okay, my question is, how does increased transparency impact actual voter engagement?
Well, when you know who is actually funding these candidates, you're more likely to be educated. Voters are more likely to be educated on these candidates because transparency is going to allow us to make more fully informed decisions.
How does the Disclose Act take away from freedom of speech if it's promoting democracy and transparency within elections?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
How exactly does the Disclose Act take away from freedom of speech if it's promoting democracy and transparency within the election system?
Although you could argue it doesn't directly affect that, you also could say the fact that we brought up, it does infringe on our rights, saying that we can't advocate for what we actually think we should be for, or we can't express our biases.
How would you address the argument that overturning Citizens United and implementing campaign finance reform could limit free speech rights of corporations and organizations?
We believe that the benefits of passing our plan outweigh any possible harms because we believe that transparency and accountability is most important in our election system.
We will now open for the second speaker from side proposition.
Because we believe that campaign finance reform is the best way to reform the electoral system, we are so proud to continue proposing our plan. So you can expect a few things in the speech. First, I'll be responding to side opposition's first few arguments, extend our case, and then finally introduce our third substantive. So moving on to responding to side op's arguments. So first, side op tells you a few things in their framing about lower voter turnout and representation, but I think both sides agree that the election system needs reform, but I think we do a much better job on that. More on that later in my speech. Second, they tell you in their first substantive about having an open primary system, but we think that with an open primary system, candidates feel more pressure to appeal to more moderate voters to appeal to a wider audience. However, this will weaken their platforms and be held less accountable to their supporters, straying away from their true policies. We also think that there's a huge flaw in side op's open primary argument here, is that the current method of funding elections prevents any real solvency. First, a lot of the impacts that side op is offering, like increasing voter engagement and having diverse views, can only be accessed if these candidates have any kind of funding. At the end of the day, you need funding for candidates to actually rally and campaign. Side ops provides no mechanism for that. Second, without campaign finance reform, candidates don't have the ability to actually gain any support because there is no campaign backing to fund their campaign. That would decrease representation because voters aren't aware of their policies, therefore decreasing voter turnout on their side of the house. Panel, note that even if lesser known candidates get some kind of funding, there's still a possible chance that voters will be motivated to vote for more major parties because they have more money for advertising and campaigning and things like that. This is also because there's no limit on campaign spending and no transparency on their side. Then they tell you in their second substantive about policy change, but we would tell you that you can only get effective policy change if you have effective campaign finance reform. We would tell you that it is a prerequisite to having more representation and voter turnout. We think that you can only have campaign finance reform to have candidate experience and policy change because we allow for more resources to be allocated to more lesser known candidates and give them an equal playing field as more popular ones. Without any transparency, more people are less likely to vote for these candidates because there's no actual candidate-voter relationship. Again, since side op is proposing a multi-party system, there's no equal funding to all parties, giving them no chance to actually compete with more known parties. We think that you'll always vote a prop ballot because we provide an immediate plan, both short-term and long-term, to have more diverse views and policies. Now moving on to extensions on our arguments. So first we told you in our substantive one about overturning Citizens United. We gave you a lot of warranty about the benefits of overturning this case, but more importantly, how it would impact future elections. By overturning Citizens United, we forced companies parties to have a spending limit on how much they can contribute to elections, meaning we limit campaign funding, limiting coercion by such large corporations, and giving more power to the people, therefore increasing voter turnout. This makes elections more accessible to the people because now large corporations won't have such influence and coerce these candidates and therefore promote more diverse and candidate options. Now then we tell you in our second substantive about how passing the Disclose Act will hold candidates more accountable and promote democracy. But even if the ACLU opposes this act, we would tell you that the trade-off of this act will always outweigh because we would much rather promote transparency and hold candidates accountable for the money that they use. This reduces their ability to find loopholes in the laws and hold them accountable for their spending, upholding the principle of democracy. We previously told you that you cannot access accountability without transparency, and that will only happen on our side. In addition, elections will better represent people due to a more varied ballot because now there are more regulations on the limits of it. Now we introduce our third substantive, how national public campaign finance reform will promote a more equitable standing between candidates. We believe that the U.S. should adopt a national public campaign finance system using democracy vouchers. While some cities and states have already implemented them, a national program is essential to support underfunded candidates and create a more equitable election process. A huge chunk of campaign financing goes into advertising because that is the only way candidates can actually get their policies in front of the public. Without adequate funds, candidates are not able to get their message and their policies out because they have such reduced ones. Democracy vouchers are a campaign finance system where citizens are issued vouchers that they can donate to eligible candidates who in turn can redeem them for campaign funds in national elections. Our reform looks like this. About 9 months before the election day, all eligible candidates will be sent vouchers that they can send to an eligible candidate by mail through an online portal or give them even in person. This is part of the plan that is modeled off of the city of Seattle, where they have had a democracy voucher since 2015. Candidates have a strict set of rules they must follow in regards to how they have to return all their public funds and will not be eligible for the system before if they don't comply. Additionally, candidates that are a part of this program agree to a limit on the money that they receive, allowing for a more equal playing field among all candidates. This will be mandatory, forcing candidates to follow the rules associated with the program, some of which include strict uses for these vouchers and the disclosure associated with the vouchers. Our proposal would force all states to comply instead of allowing some states to create loopholes to avoid laws and regulations that accompany this plan. There are two main impacts to this argument. First, citizens would use their vouchers to help pay for eligible candidates' campaigns, creating more engagement and transparency, and seeing that these vouchers would give more opportunities for these candidates. And second, democracy vouchers also give candidates the opportunity to have more equal start in elections compared to the status quo because they will be able to receive public funding, which will allow them to have a higher chance in winning the election. I previously told you about lower voter turnout in the status quo. However, we believe that we allow different candidates to have an opportunity to win these elections as people who currently do not vote feel more inclined to vote as they see their own voice getting represented on our side. And for these reasons, so proud to continue proposing our plan.
Thank you, and we will now hear from the second speaker for side opposition.
It is because we, the opposition, believe that allowing for open primaries is the best way to reform the electoral system. I am so proud to be advocating for our side of this debate. So while we have refined our views already, I would like to clarify that yes, we do agree with the proposition that the status quo is problematic. What we do not agree with, however, is how they plan to solve this issue with campaign finance reforms. The conflict with trying to solve the issue of campaign finance reforms is glaring. They wish to focus on funding more candidates, and while these finance reforms may have been aimed at limiting the influence of wealth in politics, their effectiveness has been very inconsistent. The ACLU is concerned about the chilling effects that are being created on freedom of speech and political participation. Particularly stemming from the Disclose Act, mandatory donors' disclosure could be exposing individuals to harassment and intimidation, especially those supporting controversial or biased causes. These people may steer away from contributing to advocacy groups, decreasing the amount of diverse voices in political discourse. Additionally, smaller organizations might struggle to fundraise because of the fact that supporters are having this fear of being identified, which further silences viewpoints and fear of backlash. These concerns are highlighted by the ACLU, which is committed to protecting the First Amendment right and ensuring that all citizens can participate freely in political advocacy. Legislation of the McCain-Feingold Act, Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, tried to reduce soft money, which is largely unregulated money, with the general objective to just increase the vote. It is largely money that is spent on whatever they want as long as it fits the general objective to increase the vote. In the end, soft money in the election saw its impact undermining court rulings such as Citizens United of 2010, leading to an explosion of super PACs and dark money, which the proposition has already brought up. But it contributed to allowing wealthy donors to exert disproportionate influence over political and candidates as whole, over the political landscape and candidates as whole, which not only discredits the electoral system more than it helps, but it also subverts candidates from actually being engaged in the system. Propositions stated that they can access limiting campaign finance and more transparency, but they do not ever consider how increased transparency actually affects voters' abilities to make informed decisions. Sure, now voters can see political campaigns, what happens behind the scenes, but the impacts may be very limited if the public is not actually well informed. Transparency allows insight to interest behind the candidates and politics, but if the voter lacks the knowledge or understanding to interpret this information, then it's not significantly influencing their decision in the electoral process. Besides, the proposition allows and advocates for transparency, but never actually appeals to all voters, as they stated that the open primaries have to appeal to all voters. Now, the proposition states that we do not provide funding to all candidates, but the thing is, we don't have to. With open primaries, we allow for more representation, along with more voices actually being heard for the cost of almost no money. And we also allow for a cheaper way for people to get involved with the electoral process, while also advocating for real people who believe that they will actually represent them. The proposition advocates for candidate representation, and while we believe this is important for underrepresented candidates, we also believe that the proposition is not actually thinking about how this will lead to major effects on candidates who do not have the same experiences as more wealthy candidates. Now, our last and final claim is creative representation. We allow for all voters' voices, regardless of party affiliation, to participate, ensuring representation. And this is true for two reasons. We better reflect the needs of underrepresented communities. For instance, the Left Alliance in Finland, as my partner had brought up earlier, successfully advocates for universal health care and mental health services, demonstrating how increased representation can have large effects on policy change. Candidates no longer have to side with only their side or their party. They now have to represent everybody. As we have seen with our governor, Greg Abbott, he only advocates for Republicans because the system in Texas is mainly Republican. However, with open primaries, we want a broader electorate, people actually advocating for what our nation or what our state is. The proposition tries to advocate for this with campaign finance reforms, but why should we reform a system that is so adamantly determined on eradicating itself? Assuming that the information I've given you already on the current issue with campaign finance reform isn't enough, I'm going to give you two major reasons why it's not only possible, but inevitable that the proposition's campaign finance reform or plan fails. One is partisan outcomes. Proposition promotes candidates aligned with wealthy contributors' agendas. Because of this, their campaign finance reform fails to eliminate the influence of money in politics, and it can reinforce partisan outcomes and promote candidates aligned with wealthy donors instead of the minority group. The proposition wishes to implement democracy vouchers, but at the end of the day, do you not believe that the rich will not have more money to vote for the candidates they want while still supporting that same candidate with their original wealth? While the minority group is still stuck here having almost no say because of the fact that they are equipped with less money than the rich, this outcome, I think, on their side is very possible. The increase of negative campaigning is another effect of partisan outcomes. Many candidates can prioritize their interests and the views of their major contributors rather than the perspectives of values, which have stemmed from the issue that the proposition is trying to solve. And we're just going to keep falling back into this repetitive downfall with campaign finance reforms, because as we have seen, campaign finance reforms have failed before. Now, our final and last reason why the proposition's campaign finance reform would fail is because this isn't just about campaign finance or money in general, but it's also about the lack of networking and issues that campaign finance reform doesn't respond to, especially for disadvantaged communities. Even with reforms like campaign finance, many minorities and low-income groups continue to lack the knowledge and connections they need to actually advocate for themselves and represent themselves for their interests and their needs. There will still be individuals who have no idea who to advocate for because most minority groups do not have the proper education in the system that they need to make the best decision for their situation. Disadvantaged communities who lack the proper information will never be able to properly advocate until we are on the same level playing field. And for all these reasons, I am so proud to be advocating for our side of this debate. Vote for open primaries.
You proposed an open primary, so how does this allow for greater representation and for less well-known or less well-funded candidates to actually get their policies out there?
Well, because with open primaries, we have a system where they aren't restricted by, oh, should I say this because the people will like it, or should I say it because I like it? With open primaries, we get to actually advocate for what we want or where we come from.
If these vouchers come from taxation, okay, if these vouchers come from taxation, does it not impose certain restrictions to candidates and what they can say and what they can advocate in their policies?
Well, we think that these limits that are placed on these vouchers are to ensure that these users aren't actually misusing these vouchers to support these candidates and actually using them for right reasons.
How can you be certain that lesser-known candidates will be able to get the funding necessary to stay competitive with the wealthiest candidates?
Well, lesser-known candidates are able to raise money in order to support themselves in these things, and also there's organizations that actually help and want to donate to these candidates to help them for their cause and what they believe in.
Our last question is, how do you solve for the lack of unity, i.e. less conversation, less screaming matches, and less aggressive propaganda better than how the opposition solves it with our increased representation and increased unity?
The proposition believes that the increase of transparency through our plan will lead to a more trustworthy government, therefore leading to an increase in unity and a sense of community for the federal government as a whole.
We now have the opportunity for the judges to ask one question to each team.
All right, this is a question for the proposition team. Why should we, as the judges, value transparency as the most important thing in this debate?
So the proposition side believes that transparency and a lack of secrecy is the only way that we can have accountability in the electoral system. And without transparency and accountability, we can't have a functioning democracy. And democracy is like the heart of the US electoral system. And so because of that, we believe that transparency is the most important factor in electoral reform.
All right, and for the opposition, in your world, if I understand, when everyone can still get money, there aren't campaign finance reforms, are you concerned, or how does your proposal address the issues that the proposition has raised about things like the influence of corporate money and the influence of foreign money?
Well, I believe that whenever you're trying to solve the issue of actually, I assume if what I heard was correct, or if I'm interpreting this right, you're saying why is like campaign finance I guess you could say better solution? Is that correct? I say we would solve like that because of the fact that whenever we have open primaries, we're advocating for more people who are trying to fit the needs of the people and actually trying to fix these issues. So we're advocating for real people with real values of the people.
Thank you both.
We'll now move into the reply section. I invite the first opposition speaker to give their reply.
In this speech, I would first like to summarize our main arguments and compare them to proposition arguments, and then I'll compare roads. We showed how open primaries strengthen democracy by doing things such as increasing voter engagement and turnout. We also argue by allowing independents and minority party members to participate ensures a wide range of perspectives. Their difference in the Disclosed Act further demonstrates the threats of our constitutional rights. Also, moving to vouchers, they only increase polarization because this allows people to join a voucher pool, which entrenches the status quo of super PACs and tyranny of majority. In our second argument, we showed how diverse candidates drive progressive policy change by increasing competition in the US, arguing that multiple parties push established ones to adopt exclusive policies reflecting citizens' varied identities. We also went as far as giving a few examples of countries who are already doing this and countries where it has worked effectively. Their democracy vouchers would undermine these diverse views because it limits what candidates say, which means you shut down ideas and policy actions they want to propose. This is because by forcing candidates to use funding that comes from tax vouchers, which comes from taxes, there are certain restrictions of what these candidates can actually say in their policies. This was also brought up with the ACLU, where they infringe on First Amendment rights. In our third argument, we advocated for political creativity and broader candidate representation through open primaries to promote real change. By ensuring diverse voices are heard, especially lesser known parties and different candidates. We proved that the system can reduce polarization and encourage moderate solutions to key issues. Now let me compare roads. In a props road, you have a road where there's a bunch of shady operations where candidates are trying to secure funding. There's obstruction of First Amendment rights when it comes to candidates and donors limiting policy action and engagement. There's an unknown road where they actually get this money for and the transparency they so-called advocate for. This is an unknown road. Okay, in the ops road, you have a road where there are more voices representing the people, a road where you have policy action that actually advocates to increase the livelihood of our society. You have a road where you're prone to participate and engage in politics so you can advocate for yourself. You have policy actions that you have candidates that actually advocate for these actions that you want and advocate for a change. There is room for new and improved policies to help our road on a variety of issues. The opposition actively demonstrated and has advocated for the change that we not only want, but the change that we need in our democracy. This is why I urge the panel to vote inside opposition. Thank you.
Proper representation and transparency are essential for a functioning democracy, which is why the prop is proud to continue to propose this motion. First, I will respond to the opposition's points, then summarize their arguments and explain why ops don't solve, then compare worlds. OP claims that we are limiting large corporations' freedom of speech. However, we are giving power to the people instead of allowing large corporations to have the most political sway in federal elections. They also argue that the Disclose Act infringes on free speech. However, it is just forcing companies and candidates to disclose the money that they're spending. This promotes democracy, as transparency is democratic while secrecy is not. The democracy vouchers do not stop engagement. They increase engagement, as now the public has a more personal financial stake in elections. Candidates still have to advocate for their policies and travel state to state. With the implementation of our plan, it will let all candidates do this, not just the wealthiest ones. To summarize our side of the debate, our first substantive is overturning the impacts of Citizens United v. FEC, which will reduce the impact of large corporations on elections, making elections more accessible to newer candidates and therefore increasing representation. Our second substantive is promoting democracy through the passing of the Disclose Act. The Disclose Act forces candidates and corporations to be transparent about their spending, instead of allowing dark money to continue to be funneled through the election system and giving some candidates an unfair advantage. To respond to the Ops ACLU point, we believe that promoting transparency is most important in elections. The only way for elections to be transparent is with the Disclose Act, and without transparency, we cannot truly have democracy. Our third sub is promoting the use of democracy vouchers. The democracy vouchers give power to the people because the people are the ones choosing who the money is going towards. Candidates have a strict set of rules that they must agree to before participating, and these rules hold them accountable. Vouchers promote freedom of speech because they give lesser-known candidates a voice and allow them to advocate for their policies while still having funding. We will fund this plan partly through taxes and partly through a diversion of some federal funds. Now to respond to the op side and to show why their plan will not work. The concept of an open primary is flawed because an open primary will weaken candidate transparency, as candidates may be pressured into trying to appeal to a wider audience, which will weaken their platforms as they stray away from what they truly believe in order to get more votes. Along with this, the ops plan has some clear solvency issues. Their first claim is on the advantages of an open primary system. The lack of transparency in the status quo makes it impossible for ops plan to solve. They claim that there will be more diverse views. However, if these other groups don't have enough funding, then they can't even make it to the primaries. Their second claim is about driving policy change. They say that candidates no longer have to side with only their party. However, candidates that have the support of their party will still be much more well-funded and will be able to make it further in the primaries than those who don't. Their third claim is on creative representation. Once again, without proper funding, these candidates cannot be represented. If they are lesser known, they can't compete with the extremely well-funded candidates that use dark money and super PACs to overpower the other candidates. And now a comparison. So the proposition side supports a world where the people choose their president, not large wealthy corporations. We've reduced the influence of corporations and super PACs. Meanwhile, OPT doesn't solve as they don't have finance reform, which makes other candidates unable to stay competitive with the wealthiest ones. In our world, we provide a clear path for increased representation, while OPT does not. Without a campaign finance reform, candidates cannot be held accountable. Transparency goes hand in hand with democracy, and a national campaign finance reform is essential to a more representative electoral system. Therefore, we urge the panel to side with the prop in this debate. Thank you.
Okay, panel, beginning my speech, I must say that it is important that the United States federal government steps in and starts reforming the electoral system and reducing the polarization and powerful combating candidates that deter the number of politicians and political biases and the separation and polarization within the states. It's important that the United States federal government steps in to solve this issue. Now, it's not important to only solve the issues for ourselves, but our future families, our future neighbors, our future classmates, co-workers, and even people all the way across in another state. Because with the change we advocate for, we can have a better economy, a better environment, a better society, even if not just today, then in sometime in the future. But at the end of the day, this will all be solved with open primaries, where we have to advocate for everybody and not only just some. We appeal to all voters with open primaries. Now, for our 3 reasons as to why we win today's debate. First one is increased inclusivity and increased representation. Open primaries allow voters from all parties, including independents, to participate in selecting candidates. This participation ensures that candidates must appeal to a wide electorate rather than just their own party. The Brennan Center for Justice highlights that states with open primaries tend to have higher voter turnout and engagement. When independents are included in primaries, we see more candidates that represent the wider range of views, which represents the actual demographic of the electorate. Our second reason as to why we win today's debate is decreased polarization. Open primaries have the potential to mitigate polarization by encouraging candidates to adopt a stance that represents more of the status quo. A political system that allows for more advocacy decreases radical viewpoints. It allows for a system where diversity and diverse candidates can emerge. Open primaries can increase conversation, dialogue, and less overall propaganda, as I had brought up in one of my CX questions, and screaming matches between candidates and voters. As we all know, talking about candidates is sort of a sore topic nowadays, so just being able to fix this issue with open primaries is something that we would love to solve. Our moral approach on a healthier political culture is one that prioritizes collective solutions over diverse rhetorics. This will promote democracy better than the proposition with their campaign finance reforms, which increases involvement focusing on candidates rather than candidates and voters. The proposition wants to advocate for a side that directly affects candidates but indirectly affects voters. We advocate for candidates and voters. We advocate for all citizens. Now, our third point on why we went to this debate is realistically. Realistically, our side, we believe, is more likely to happen. We advocate for benefiting society as a whole, so even though campaign finance reforms aim to level the political playing field by limiting the influence of money on politics, these reforms will never directly solve the issue of polarization and underrepresentation within our nation. This shows how these smaller parties or less wealthy parties force bigger candidates and these political parties to advocate for change. On our side of this debate, as you can see, we advocate for change and more representation. And our third and final reason as to why we win today's debate is because, as we stated earlier, despite efforts with the McCain-Feingold Act, political spending has continued to rise. So even though we have tried to fix political finance before, it has still failed, often leading to emergence of super PACs and unregulated dark money. According to a 2020 report by the Center of Responsive Politics, the amount spending on elections has only increased, demonstrating the amount of limitation that finance reform actually creates in achieving true equality and true equity. Now, let's not forget about the fact that they also infringe on the First Amendment right, which goes against democracy as a whole. But finally concluding my speech, I just want to state that we allow for the rights of not only just some voters, but all voters. Our advantages include broader societal changes. We allow for more candidates, more representation, more voices being heard, more ideas. And we allow for adopting the fact that, yes, the status quo is problematic, but we need to do something to change it. We allow for all voices to be heard, all allowing all voters from different parties to interact with other voters and different views so we can get an idea of what democracy is supposed to be and not just Democrat and Republican. We want open primaries for the fact that we can create change and we can create representation within our society. And for all these reasons, I'm so proud to stand with our side of this debate.
I think it's very clear that throughout this debate that side op provides no real solvency in their plan, and I firmly believe that you should vote a prop ballot because we're the only side that allows everyone to be represented. So proud to continue proposing our plan. You can expect only two things in the speech. First, I'll be going over a roads by roads comparison, and then finally going on to our voters. So going to roads by roads here. First, on op side of the House, you see their open primary system will always fall through because there's no real mechanism for how it will actually work. Voter representation decreases on their side because funding will favor more wealthier candidates, leaving lesser known candidates without a chance to promote their policies. This will lead to a reduced voter representation. Then, their side provides no true transparency to the public because the public is not being made aware of how their finances are being spent, feeding into more of corruption and dark money. However, on our side, prop, we see that when we pass the Disclosed Act, we allow the public view to view the campaign financing of these candidates, allowing for more transparency to its people because we prefer it over secrecy. Because we offer a more equal playing field among smaller candidates, the voters are more likely to be aware of their policies, and that's how you lift more minority voices and representation. Then, in these democracy vouchers, we allow citizens to publicly fund lesser known candidates to actually fund their campaigns and actually touch the public. So moving on to our voters here. So first voter, does our plan really violate the freedom of speech? Panel, we recognize that there are trade-offs to passing the Disclosed Act. However, we believe that these trade-offs are inherently better than not passing it because no transparency means there's an increase in dark money, corruption, and secrecy. You only see this on op side. However, passing the Disclosed Act will only allow the public to be more educated on their views and policies, allowing for more transparent views. We think that you'll always vote for the side that has more transparency. Second, which side increases transparency here? We think that there was not a lot of engagement on this issue, but we still specifically think that one of the main issues that cause a this is one of the main issues that causes like a decrease in voter turnout. Because there's no transparency on op side, less people are engaged in actually wanting to vote for these candidates because campaign finances are not actually being made aware to the public, undermining the principle of democracy. However, passing the Disclosed Act forces candidates to actually make their finances public so that the people are more aware of where their money is being allocated to, increasing voter turnout and transparency because people are more likely to be interested in their policies, and this will in turn hold more candidates accountable. Now, thirdly, and last voter, which side gives equal representation among the candidates and the people? We think that funding is a large portion of the problem today, and only by reforming that the campaign finance, we can access more benefits like creative policies, voter turnout, and representation. Seeing that there's a more personal stake in these elections, using democracy vouchers, voters are more likely to be engaged in funding for the candidate that they believe is more representative of their policies and their beliefs. Additionally, we would only increase freedom of speech to smaller candidates and allow their creative policies to spread to the public. And because we advocate for more candidates and voters, I strongly urge you to vote a prop ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, what an amazing, amazing job you guys did. Thank you, guys. Can we give everyone a round of applause? I was so thrilling to watch. I saw, I think a few of you, if not was all of these a couple months ago, or even just vast, amazing improvement in your skills even in the last couple of months. Not that y'all weren't awesome a couple of months ago, but just to see your development is incredible. And I thought this was a really interesting topic, and it's obviously timely given our current presidential debate. And so I'm not going to render a specific decision. I'm kind of noodling on this a little bit right now, but I did think it was great that you guys kind of anchored in the, sort of First Amendment implications. of, the propositions reform. And I think that's worthy of discussion. I also think both of you guys are trying to kind of anchor on what would create more diverse views and more choice for voters and create more voter engagement. And so I thought that discussion was just so interesting on both sides because, from the propositions perspective, it was like, can we get to transparency and can we fund maybe lesser known candidates with tax vouchers? And I'm like, that's a really interesting idea. And then I really loved where you guys went, which is, can we kind of abandon the notion of party in the primaries and encourage more people to participate and kind of get more diverse views there? And I thought that was also quite interesting. So I thought that it was just a really good and robust discussion on all fronts, and incredibly well done. So thank you both.
I also really enjoyed watching this debate. Thank you all so much for an amazing job. I feel like I'm being asked to choose between two really great flavors of ice cream, and I'm not allowed to pick both, and so it's really tough when you're trying to think about how you make a decision. One kind of substantive point I'd pick up on that I found really interesting in this debate is this discussion of the impact of each of y'all on polarization. I heard, I think, first actually from the proposition that an issue with the opposition is that in open elections, there's an incentive for people to appeal to the broader center and not be so extreme. That sounds like not polarization. And then Prop goes further and even argues that this is bad because it can be disingenuous when a candidate is out there trying to appeal to the masses and they're not really kind of sticking to their platform or being honest about their views. And I thought that's a really interesting discussion because obviously you have this value of transparency that you're, I think, doing an excellent job of advocating. And then there's a separate question in my mind, like, would it really be such a bad thing if we were maybe a little bit more appealing to the broader center? And it's something I think is really interesting to think about in the context of these two positions. So thank you both so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to hear you all debate again. I've had the benefit of hearing you a couple times, and as Ms. Glover said, you all improve every time. The couple things I wanted to say, and I wanted to then mention the debate proper, is that debate and DISD is doing great things. You all are amazing speakers, you are amazing advocates, and it's not easy to debate in front of your friends, much less take the time that you clearly spent to think about a nuanced approach to a very important issue. So again, thank you all so much for putting in the time for what you're doing. And I would also say, I know there's this senatorial thing happening now, but Allred or Cruz would be in trouble if they were here, I feel, because there are real things like, fact checks, things like that. You all were good. The second thing I wanted to say is this is an amazing example of how you can address a problem by using different metrics, different proposals, and be comparative in the way that we need to evaluate it. From what I heard from the proposition was that we need more transparency. We need, in the way that the candidates are funded, there's dark money, things along those lines. And there's a solution in Seattle called democracy vouchers that could help. The question is pointed out by the op is that, yeah, maybe there's more transparency, but there is no change is who is running. And we have the same sense of the same candidates with the same ideas that may not appeal to disadvantaged communities. On the other hand, their argument is that open primaries allow for more voices, more disadvantaged communities. In fact, maybe a cheaper approach by which we can run elections. I think the example that was given was at $11 or something along those lines per person, which I thought was pretty intriguing. The concern, though, is in your world, would parties have even enough money to be in the election? And so it's, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But what the takeaway point for me is you all really thought about ways to address a problem that is endemic to our system of democracy as it currently exists. Whether it's Democratic or Republican, we kind of hear the same things year after year, cycle after cycle. And I thought that both policies, both proposals are good comparative ways to perhaps look at things in a different way. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Just a few remarks as we close out this evening. First of all, thank you for coming, and for those of you watching live stream, thank you for watching. To the students in the room, there is not an activity that will transform your life more than participating in debate. There is nothing better. It will help you now, but it will change your life, and it will help you in the future. And not only will it change your life, it will create a difference maker. You will be the next generation to go out and fix this mess that we're living in, and you will make the world a better place. If you're a debate coach watching this, there is nothing more important you will do in your educational career than to work with young debaters, than to offer them the activity of debate. It doesn't matter how much you know, it matters that you give them the opportunity and the way to participate in debate. And if you're watching this live stream or watching on a video later, the most important thing you can do is to support difference makers, and that's to support debate as an activity. Support your local UDL, and if you like this video, you can support the Dallas Urban Debate League. All you have to do is go to dallasdebate.org, and you can volunteer or donate to us to help us create the future leaders of Dallas. Thank you for coming tonight.